Today's game from Vugar Gashimov is from 2009 at the Copeland Rapid Tournament. His opponent in this game is the veteran grandmaster Bogdan Lalic, who at one point went 110 games without defeat. This is a really wonderful miniature, and if you want to see another great miniature from Lalic, be sure to also check out the game against Gelfand that you can find in the links in the description below. Gashimov opens with e4, and we get another Russian game. Now this time he goes ahead and plays the most common move, capturing on e5, and after d6 the knight falls back and black captures on e4. I'm going to zip through the opening here because for one thing, I'm really not an expert on the Russian game at all. It's not something I've played with either color, and most moves in the Russian game can be played. You're dealing with a situation where there's a fine line between a slight advantage and equality. It's symmetrical, and almost any move is possible. So the theory is not that interesting to get into. We're zipping through it. At this point, I want to pause and say I really like rook b1 here. White gets the rook onto a half-open file and tickles b7 so that the c8 bishop is tied down to its defense, and the rook on e1 is obviously already on an open file. This game is really a tour de force for rook development. Gashimov is going to use the rooks and his queen, his major pieces, tremendously well, and it's worth studying how he employs them in this game. At this point, black goes ahead and eliminates the pesky knight on e5 and plays bishop c5 to hit the f2 pawn. Queen f3, and then Gashimov plays to exchange the bishop on c5 and achieves that. And now rook b4, made possible by the exchange of the bishop on c5. Now, I really like this position. I want to pause for a moment and say that for the last few moves, we've been dealing with a situation where black has a much better pawn structure. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. This is a miserable pawn structure, and if this were a king and pawn endgame, without looking at it, I just assumed that black should be able to win the king and pawn endgame. However, that's not the whole story. Of course, white's piece play with the two rooks, the queen, and the bishop counts for something. All of those pieces are active, and they're able to exert a lot of pressure on the black position. In fact, Stockfish for the last few moves and currently tends to like black. However, I think that that's really a poor estimate of white's chances. White has pretty good possibilities of attack here, and in fact, Stockfish doesn't even see the winning blow coming. So the rook lifts and the queen falls back to e7, the most natural move. We get rook f4, starting to bring more pressure against the king side. Pawn c5 and rook f6. Brilliant. Absolutely wonderful. This is not exactly a unique idea. You can point to Fischer vs. Benko as a famous game featuring this idea, and one of Tal's, well, probably Tal's very first brilliancy, Tal vs. Leonov, actually features this idea. The rook is hammered into the position, and black can't capture it, as we'll see in a moment, so white is able to build up quite a lot of pressure and actually win this position. In fact, after rook f6, black is totally busted. There's simply no way to save the game. So black tries rook d8. So let's see what would happen if black could capture here on f6. If you capture, the key move is queen g3 check, pushing the king over to h8, the only move other than bishop g4, and now queen h4 hits h6. Also, queen f4 would have done the job. There's no way to defend that, and if you try and step up, we just play rook g3 and mate. So you definitely cannot accept the rook sacrifice on f6. So rook d8 is played to try and make a little room for the king to run. If the king could get to d7, black would be oh so happy. Fortunately, that's not going to happen. Queen h5, and again, you cannot capture the rook. If you try, then we have rook g3 check, king over, queen check, king over. Pause your video if you want to try and see the next move if you haven't spotted it already. The key is bishop b5 check. I always love this idea when you're attacking on one flank and you switch to the other. It can be really hard to spot this, but it's totally winning here. It basically is a move played to force black to put something on d7, blocking the king's escape, and it is just checkmate. Fantastic. So after queen h5, we get king f8. The king is desperately trying to get out of dodge. Rook g3, so if the king runs, we're just going to take this on g7 here. And now pawn c4. This is a nice try from black. The point is we're cutting off the bishop from b5, so it's now possible to capture this rook. If black were to move after, say, bishop e2, the rook can be captured and the king gets away and black just has an extra rook. Unfortunately, it's white's move, and if you want to, I'd encourage you to pause the video and figure out what white played here. So the winning move is rook takes g7. I told you the rooks were the star of this game. After king takes, we would just have checkmate like this. Very, very nice. So black didn't take the rook on g7 and instead took the bishop on d3. And we need another precise move here, but Gashimov found it. Rook to g8. This is at least the third sacrifice of a rook in the main lines of this game. Fantastic. The king must capture, the only legal move, and then rook takes h6. And actually, Lalic resigned in this position. The threat is very simple. Rook h8, king g7, queen to h6, and checkmate, and there's no stopping it. For example, if you step forward, I just push you right back and repeat the idea. Game over and checkmate. I hope you enjoyed this miniature as much as I did. It's really a wonderful demonstration of how to attack with major pieces in a position like this. Fantastic stuff. If you liked the video, please do like and subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of future videos. And also be sure to check out the video with Gashimov playing against Gelfand and another fantastic miniature in the Russian game.